Here we go. Ooh, hi. Hello. All right. Hi, this is an introduction to Node.js. We're going to talk about sparkly stuff and sockets and HTML. And it's going to be a beautiful journey that we all experience together. So, I'm Ben Van Treese. I'm at Van Treeseball all over the internet. I use hip internet stuff. It's cool. I work at Goldfire. We make games and stuff. We use Node.js for lots of stuff, platform code, and the actual game code on the back end. So it allows us to do lots of real-time communication and build real-time multiplayer games. This slide and the next couple are just to kind of brush over how much JavaScript we do know. We know that JavaScript has variables, functions, objects, arrays, and you kind of need to know this stuff if we're going to go through the rest of these slides. But if you don't, feel free to Google them, and there should be examples that will help you understand. With that being said, let's just dive into this. What is Node.js? It is a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine that is an event-driven, non-blocking I/O model that makes it lightweight and efficient. Well, what does that mean? V8 is the thing inside of Chrome that when you run JavaScript, V8 is what runs it. And some person was like, hey, V8 is open source. I wonder if we could take it and run it outside of Chrome. And then they did, and now we have Node, which is pretty cool, because it lets you write JavaScript and run it anywhere, because V8's just written in C, and you can compile it and run it anywhere. So I'll talk about the rest of what event-driven, non-blocking I/O model, blah, 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 all this stuff means. The important thing here is that it is a JavaScript runtime, which means it can interpret and run JavaScript wherever we want it to. And that includes outside of the browser, which is really neat. So yeah, what does all that mean? I explained that. Okay, so it runs outside of the browser. Npm, or Node Package Manager, is a package manager that comes with Node that allows you to install other people's code to make your life easier. Node also has built-in libraries, but Npm is a thing. If you use Node, you will use Npm all the time. It's really helpful, and it's super easy to write your own code and publish it on Npm, which we can talk about a little later. Being event-driven is an important thing to note in the description. Browsers are also event-driven. If you've ever done something with like jQuery where it's like, hey, when the user clicks this button, pop up an alert, right? That's an event. You're saying on mouse click, trigger my function. So on the Node side, we can say, when a user sends a request to my server, do this thing. When I receive data over a WebSocket, do this thing. And I'll explain what WebSockets and requests and stuff are here in a few minutes. But the idea of it being event-driven means that when it's running, it just kind of sits there and waits for things to happen. So it's very efficient in that way, because instead of running in a loop and just burning CPU, Node just doesn't do anything until something happens. It just chills out until its friends call it. So why do we want to use Node? What is the point of this? Like, why are we here? Node lets you write any kind of program in JavaScript. You can write a server, you can write a CLI tool, application scripts, automated tools. So an example of that would be like, say you wanted to write a small program that would look through a text document and replace every copy of the word JavaScript with the word sparkly code. That's fairly easy to do. And Node actually lets you use the file system. So it gives you full access to the computer that you're on. There's other CLI tools. For example, Webpack is a very popular one that people use for browser code. So it's written in Node, and it lets you do stuff like, if I wrote my, it lets you do stuff like use ESLint, or like before I push to Git, I want you to run this script and make sure that all of my code looks nice. If it doesn't, don't push my code up, give me a warning so I can fix it. So there's all kinds of automated stuff you can do. There's scaffolding tools too, where if you want to start a new React project or a new Angular project, in the command line you can just do something like scaffold Angular and it will spit out a whole directory structure and build the base of the project for you, because building all that boilerplate is kind of a waste of time. PayPal was written in Node, which is really neat. When they rewrote PayPal in Node, they ended up writing 30% less code, which is pretty impressive, because it was probably written in Java or something before, which is not, it's very verbose. JavaScript can be more compact. Doesn't mean it's always better, but it is easier to read in Grok sometimes, in my opinion. Also, it's one less language to learn, right? So you can actually write libraries and then use something like Webpack and use them both on the server and the client, which is what a thing we do a lot at my job. For example, in a game you might have something where it like adds up a player's score. So we have that in a utility file. So on the server it adds up the score, and then on the client it adds up the score as well in two separate places, so that we don't have to send that data back to the client, but we can verify the same thing happened on the server. Because we don't, I mean, we do care what their UI says, but the UI saying something slightly off is not a world-ending event. So that's really nice. Plus, if you do that, all of your code is tested in the same place. So you write one test and you know it works on the browser and on the server. So that's really nice. I've been talking about servers a lot. What actually is a server? Does anybody have has anybody used a web server or setting up a web server or build their own server? So that's a pretty common. Okay, so most people have done that. I'm gonna brush over it real quick. So a server, lots of people like to use this word two different ways, which is really frustrating, but it is either a computer that's running a program, or it is the program that's running on a computer, which makes sense, right? Sure. Used to, computers were slow, so you ran one thing on one computer, but with modern computers, you can have one computer that's running 30 different servers. Okay, so in our case, we're talking about the program itself, not the machine. Yeah, exactly what I just said. I don't know. It's really weird. So how do we use Node? We all know what a server basically is, but a server is a thing that runs and other programs can talk to it. So a web server, your browser is a program that's going to talk to this web server and do something with it. So how do we use Node? First, we got to install it. So we just go to nodejs.org and click on the download link. So let's see. I'll just go there, nodejs.org. And there's a giant download link right there, yeah. Except get this one, because this is not necessarily always stable. I think it's pretty stable, but I don't, anyways, this has long-term support. You should use the long-term support version in most cases. So yeah, you install it. On Windows and Mac, it's easy. Linux is Linux. It's fairly easy in most cases, but if you're using Arch Linux and you compiled your own stuff, I don't know what you're doing. All right, so we're gonna run a thing real quick in the CLI. I'm gonna do it in my virtual machine. No, I won't. I'll do it on Windows here. So we're gonna open up command, and I'm gonna make this bigger so you guys can actually see it real quick. All right. Yeah, I know you're broken. All right. So once you've installed Node, you can just run it on the command line here. So let's make that a little bit bigger. That's probably too big. Okay. So we type Node, and it pops up this weird little blinky thing. You can't really see it up there, but that's fine. There's a little pointy arrow and a blinky thing, I promise. There. Yeah, you see it. Ooh, look at that. What is this? What is it even doing? This is Node's REPL, which is basically when you run Node and you don't give it a file to run, it just starts itself up and it says, hey, you can run JavaScript in me right now. So let's try that out real quick. We're just going to do 1 + 1, and it returned 2. So, hey, I just ran some JavaScript in Node. Bam, we're using Node. We're in the money. We're going to run this function console log. Does everybody know what console log does? Okay, cool. Just double checking. So it says hello and then undefined, which you're like, where did undefined come from? Undefined is actually what console log returns. So this runs the code and tells you what it returns every time. Cool, so we ran some node code. That's pretty neat. To exit that, you can hit Control-C twice or type exit, as it says there. All right, so we did that. And you're like, all right, that's pretty cool, but how do we actually use Node? Like, what are we doing here? We can make a JavaScript file, which I think I should already have in here. So let's go look in here. All right, well, it's not gonna do that. Whatever. Let's go open my code folder here. And we're going to make a new file, new folder, and we're going to call it my first node project. We're going to open this up. We're going to make a new file in here, and we're going to call it, we're going to do console.log hello world. We're going to save that, and we're going to call it index.js. So now when we go back to our command prompt, we're going to come in here, and we're going to go to my first node project, and we can see we have index.js here. And if we just type node index.js, it's going to run the file I just made. So that's neat, I guess. You know, like, oh, I can run JavaScript in the command line. So once we've done that, that entry point or that script, that JavaScript script, is now a program that we can execute through Node. A lot of times, what you'll do. Well, I'll get into that. So that's pretty cool. So we just wrote a Node.js application, right? It doesn't do very much. It just says hello world, but I mean, we did it. We're Node programmers now. Let's put this on our resume. Right. So how do we actually use it? I'm going to write an HTTP server or a web server real quick. First, though, I want to go, okay, I have to apparently go click on this here because Google Drive does not let me just click on links. So we're gonna go read the Node HTML API real quick. So this is the Node's HTTP API. It has a whole bunch of stuff. You probably can't read any of this. That's fine. We're gonna zoom in so it looks more intimidating. So it has all of this stuff, and it's like, what is this even, right? So yeah, why is this so insane? Node is a very low-level wrapper around a lot of C code. So this is why NPM in and of itself is very important, because a lot of people have written a lot of libraries that make this stuff not gross looking. So in this case, we are going to use the core libraries HTTP thing real quick and just write a server. So let's pull this up. So this right here is all the code that's required to create an HTTP server and serve a string as HTML. So it's like 6 lines of code, I think, right? So let's take this, and we're just gonna take it. We're gonna copy and paste. No, not cut it. We're gonna copy and paste it into that index file we just made, right? So we're gonna, there we go. Hit save. We're gonna come back over here, and we're gonna run it again. And it's doing something. It's blinking at me. So let's go back to our browser here, and we're gonna type in, that's not my localhost. All right, localhost 8000. And if you don't know what localhost :8000 is, that's basically, localhost is my computer, and 8000 is the port, which is kind of like a PO box. Like if you go to a post office, you can't just like tell someone to deliver mail to a post office, because they'll be really confused. Yeah, so you have to tell them what PO box to put the mail in. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. All right, so apparently my thing is broken for some reason. Oh, I know what it is. I am running a bunch of garbage in the background, so please ignore that. Pretend this is 9,000. And this is the fun of coding. We got to debug stuff all the time. All right, so we go to 9,000. That's still not localhost. And, okay, I don't know why that's not working right now, but let's pretend it is. Let's move on. Oh, I don't know if I restarted this. Huh. Okay, well, whatever. It's fine. Apparently I broke something setting this talk up. All right, so it's supposed to respond with hello world. And if you do this, it will probably work because you don't have a bunch of garbage installed on your computer. Cool. So that's nice, but like, what is this code actually doing? So let's walk through it real quick. This part at the top where we say var HTTP equals require the string HTTP. Requires a special thing in Node, and you can use this on the browser if you include some other packages out of NPM, which is really nice. But require says, I want you to go and find the index file of a library called HTTP and load it into this variable for me. So that's cool because that means you can easily have like big blobs of code that you separate out, and you're like, this blob of code lives over there, and we're going to call it HTTP and then pull it in and use it. In JavaScript, we call this modules. So this loads the HTTP module, and as it says, you can also load npm modules. So HTTP lets us do stuff with HTTP. The next thing we did here is we have this function that says it's a request handler, and it takes in a request and a response. This is actually the callback function or the event handler for when the client's browser requests the page from the HTTP server. So it actually wouldn't matter, and I'm not sure why this is not working, but if I put like /foo/bar/baz in here, normally on a web page that would bring up a different web page. But in this case, we're literally saying anytime we get a request, only return hello world. So that's kind of a funny idea. You could make a web server that doesn't do anything but tells you hello. So in this case, yeah, we have response.write, response.end. And the reason why you have to say end is because HTTP actually can stream data. So you have to tell it to end the response so the client's browser will know that it received all the data. And that kind of stuff is also why it's nice to wrap things like HTTP in another library that's a lot easier to use. And then finally, the last thing we do in this code here, we're going to create the server and then tell it to listen on a port. So here we're just saying HTTP, this is the module we included. We're telling it to create a server with the request handler we just gave it. So then we tell it to listen on port 8000. So cool, we made a web server. That's pretty awesome. Mine doesn't work.
So the res is that like res.write and res.end, is that a library?
Oh, okay, so yeah, let me explain this a little farther here. In the request handler, we have two parameters that come in. Does everyone know how arguments work in functions? Like when you call a function, you can pass things into the function as arguments. In this case, when we get a request from the client browser, the HTTP library will call our function, request handler, with the request and response arguments for us. So, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry? Oh, right. Oh, that would be why my thing didn't work. Thank you for that. Look at that. Right, so this is actually supposed to look like this. And if we look at my other slide, I did this. So that's cool. So let's paste this again and actually watch it work now. Thanks. And what he told me to do was pass the request handler in. And the other question was, what is rec and res in this function? So let's go over here. This is not the right thing. There we are. Okay, so let's paste this in. Now it should work. Before, because this was empty, it was getting the request, but it was never telling the browser that we handled the request. So the browser was just waiting for the server to tell it something, which is why it was just spinning over and over and over. So let's go. Oh, one other thing is when you're in the command line, if there's a program running, if you hit Control-C, that tells the current program that's like taking control of your command line to quit. It sends I don't remember what the signal is, but there's some special signal thing that it sends to the program and tells it to die. So, all right. So we have that running, and then we'll go back to localhost 8000. Hey, look, it actually worked this time. That's cool. Look, boom, website, we did it. Hello world. So if we go to like slash, let's just do /otherthing.html. It doesn't actually do anything because what happens is the path that it's requesting, we're not handling it separately. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, so we made an HTTP server just now. That's pretty cool. We built our own web server. Now you might be like, why would I want to do that? Because we have Apache and Nginx and all these other web servers. Well, Node is a nice and easy way to write dynamic web servers. So let's say you had something like, this is a really dumb example, but you could do this. You could write a thing that when you go to localhost :8000 / some number / some number, it would add those two numbers together and return it. So you could write a HTTP calculator if you wanted. I don't know why you would do that, but you can. It's cool. A real example would be you go to that / someone's username on Twitter and it loads their feed. You go to, any of these things. Basically, because we have the request and response coming in as arguments, we can look at what was in the address bar and return different results based on that. So let's go onwards to using modules and making modules. So what is a module? A module it's a JavaScript file. Everything's JavaScript files. Node servers, they're JavaScript files. Modules, they're JavaScript files. Everything's JavaScript file. So it's another JavaScript file that uses this special keyword called exports, which takes a object or function or any variable really. You could actually, if you wanted, write your own Node module that was like 3, and it would export a thing called 3 that was literally just the number 3, if you wanted to do that. That actually could be useful if you needed some constant like pi divided by 4 or something. I mean, I still can't imagine you actually doing that, but you could, and that's cool. So we export some data, and that can be required by another file in the same way we just use require HTTP, as this says. So let's make our own real quick. So in a file called hello.js, we're going to have this, which is module.exports, an object with a function say hello on it. And then our index, we're going to require it. One thing to pay attention to here is we have this // in front of this. And this is very important because what that is saying is the / means dot is your current directory. So you're like saying, hey, don't look for a thing called hello outside of my current directory. Look in the current directory, there should be a file called hello.js. You can actually use it for directories as well if you want. As long as there's a directory called hello with an index.js file in it, it will also load that. So that's pretty nice, but that's a thing to look out for because it can be kind of confusing. So let's go ahead and do this. We're going to take this guy. Forget that I can't click on the screen. All right, we're going to come back over to my Sublime text here. We're going to go into my first Node project. We're going to make a new file. We're going to paste this guy in. Or make sure this actually works this time. We're going to save this as hello. If I can type hello.js and hit save. Then we're going to come back to the index. We're going to get rid of our web server. We don't need that anymore. We're not doing web server stuff. We're going to copy this. We're going to paste it in here and save it. So I don't know what those weird quotes were. Okay, so we're saying find the hello module in my current directory, load it into hello, and then we're going to call the function off of it. So you can just see that like this is literally just exporting this object, and then the object's assigned to this variable when we require it. And if that doesn't make sense, please let me know because I can explain that a little further. So now when we run node.js, it explodes. Because apparently I didn't save something. Oh, I know what it is. It inserted these funky quotes that aren't actually quotes because that's really helpful. All right, so we're gonna run it and it says hello world. Cool. So you can see, I think, how this would be really helpful if, say, this guy also required something, and that required something else, and that required something else. So instead of having to include all of these files in the other files, Node will actually traverse the require structure for you and just pull all those in and let you run that. So this is a really nice way for code organization, which for a lot of applications it's not that important, but when you're writing very large applications, I think one of our games has like 600,000 lines of code or something. So there's probably 600, 700, 800, 900 files. So dealing with code management in large projects can be fun. But anyway, this is great. So that's how we use a module. That's how we write our own module. And the cool thing is with npm, we can actually put that in its own directory, npm init, and then publish that module for other people to use. And they just install it. So how do we use other people's modules from npm? We're going to use a thing called Express. This is a nice, simple wrapper, well, a simple-ish wrapper around the HTTP module that we used earlier. And you can see here, looks pretty similar. So to install Express, you just type npm I or npm install, and then the name of the module, so npm I express. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll see if anything breaks here, because this did break yesterday when I had an issue with npm's cache, or I don't know, it's really strange. Cool. Oh, no. Okay, so this is just telling me that I don't have a package JSON file, which is, if you've ever coded in like another language where it requires like a project file that tells you where all the code is and how to run this stuff, package.json is a thing that tells Node, hey, this is my project, look at this file called package.json, and it has a lot of information about the project name, what file to run, what dependencies I need in the project. So if we run npm install without any command after it, it will actually look at the package.json for you and install everything. So if you get a package.json from someone else's project and you put it in yours, you just run install, it will go grab all the modules and install it for you. That's really nice. Okay, so you can see here at the bottom it says it added 48 packages in 2 seconds. So now we have an Express installed. So let's go look at the code here. So you can see the require Express thing is the same thing. Whoever wrote this, I copied it from somewhere, doesn't like semicolons, which is fine. We've required this module, and we're going to use this. And the reason why this is nice to me is because remember earlier how I was saying like /foo or /something.html with the normal HTML thing, HTTP thing will return the same content? In this case, it actually won't. We're telling the application that we've created that when we get an event from the browser telling us to get a file, when they say get with nothing after the port, to return this. Otherwise, we're not going to return anything. So let's go ahead and copy this into our index file here real quick. And we'll just run this. So save that. I don't know why port 3000, whatever. Okay, so we're going to come back over here, and then we're going to run node index.js. Again, it's not telling us anything, but we should be able to come over here and refresh. And you can see here it says we can't get this other thing. So Express automatically tells you, like, if an error occurs. This is basically a 404. It's like, hey, I don't know what that thing is because you didn't tell me how to give that back to users. So let's delete all of that and just get the root. And you can see here it's saying hello world. So let's go look at this real quick. So we have this where we're getting get. So if we come in here and we put another one and we say /bar, and we want that to say bye everyone, or maybe even oh hi Mark. Right, we're gonna save that and we're gonna restart our node server so that we can run it. And it's /bar. So if we refresh this, we get hello world, and now we put /bar, and it says, oh, hi, Mark. So that's neat. You can actually use a static plugin for Express to serve static HTML files that you've already written as well. And then with other HTTP verbs, you can do even more interesting stuff. Does everybody know the difference between get and post in HTTP? If you don't, basically, the verb in HTTP is the browser saying, hey, I want to load this or get this. And then post is saying, hey, I want to take some data and save it somewhere. So that's useful because if you have like a user that is, say a user's editing their profile on Twitter or they're making a new tweet. When they hit save, that's going to post, post that data to the server, and then you can save it in a database. And then you can reload that when you go to the get/their username page, as I was saying earlier, to get this dynamic content. I don't want to delve too much into databases or anything because I think that just learning what Node is and what modules are is probably enough. But Mongodb, which is a database, real quick, is really nice because it saves JavaScript objects. So that means you can have JavaScript from all the way from the browser to the server, into the database, and back out. You don't have to use SQL or any of this strange stuff. You just save it and then load it, and it all looks the same, which is really nice. So other stuff you can use Node for is writing CLI tools. So let's see if I can't install a CLI tool real quick. So I'm going to install ESLint. This might just explode. We'll find out real quick. And what ESLint is and what linting in general is linting is a thing you do to make sure that all of the code in a project meets some standard. Why is that important? Well, if all the code looks the same, it's easier to read, and etc. At least that's what people think. People may disagree. Let's see. Oh, okay, I can't run that. But, okay, so typically there's two ways to install Npm modules. One is in the directory you're in. So if we hit dir here, you can see there's this thing called node_modules. So when I npm install a module, it saves it into the node modules directory. But if I want something like a CLI tool installed globally so I can just run ESLint as a program, we need to install it globally, like I just said. So let's do npm i-g ESLint. And what that does is it installs ESLint as a global module so that any project that's on my machine can use it. But it also registers ESLint as an executable. So you can see I ran ESLint and spat all this stuff. That's cool because that means just by writing an npm module, you can write programs that people can run on their computer. Like in JavaScript, you can write programs that other people run. And it gets even more complicated using Electron and stuff. You can actually write Windows apps, kind of, which is really, really cool. So we're going to run ESLint on our index.js. And apparently it doesn't have a configuration file, so let's initialize that and then run it again. And let's see. Oh, I don't want to. just whatever. Okay, fine, don't, whatever. Okay, so you can see that you can run this. I'm not gonna set up ESLint because it's not that super important. It's got a little menu that tells you how to do stuff. Another thing you can do is you can run this command called npm init, and what that does is it creates a package JSON for you. So I'm just gonna hit enter a bunch, and it's gonna save a package JSON for us. So let's go look at that real quick, and I'm gonna dissect this with you guys for just a second so we know what's going on. All right, so you can see here we have a thing called My First Node Project. It's version 1.0, which it shouldn't be. We're gonna lower the version number here. All right, 0.1.0, that's better. The main file that it's gonna try to run is index.js. If you deploy your module to other people, index.js is the thing that will get included when they require your module, as long as it says index.js in the main thing in the package JSON here. You can actually tell it to point to something else if you want, but in general, this is probably a pretty good idea to just leave it at the default. It can be useful to do other things. You can see here it has two dependencies. So it has ESLint and Express as dependencies. So if I delete my node modules folder and just run npm install with no commands, it will actually install everything in this dependencies list. And then the rest of this, so we have a thing called scripts, which allows us to set up scripts for our project. So if you wanted to have a test suite run, you can actually do npm run test. And I'll do that real quick. Here you can see it just echoes like, there's no tests in this thing. Yeah, it doesn't like any of that exploded. No tests are specified. You should write tests. So that's cool. This is also, we can take this, now that we have this, we can actually just run npm publish. I don't know if this will actually try to publish it. We'll find out. Okay, it did try to publish it, but that's fine. So, wait, where did it go? Oh, here we are. Okay. So I don't have the permission to publish this right now, but if I was logged in as my user, this would actually have pushed this up to npmjs.org or .com or whatever their thing is now, and then other people could npm install my first node project and would just pull down my code for them. So it's literally that easy to start working with and writing open source for Node. Which is really cool, and you should. If you write a small thing that you think is neat, just put it on npm and people will use it. I have a thing that gets, I don't know, like 100 downloads a year or something, which is, I'm like, wow, I helped 100 people do stuff. Maybe, or maybe it's just bots downloading. It could be. I don't know. That's fine. Okay, so the next thing I want to brush over real quick is Webpack and Browserify. There's some other tools that are similar to these, but what they do is Webpack and Browserify basically allow you to write npm style requires in your client code. It will take it and bundle it all up into a single file, usually called app.js, that you can include in your HTML. And that's really nice because using these, you can actually have your server code, your client code, and then any shared code all side by side in your project. You can require things out of your shared code into the browser and run Webpack, and it will just, you use literally the same files from your server on the client, which is super useful in a lot of situations. I mean, it is easy to try to go overboard with that stuff sometimes too, though. So I'm going to talk about HTTP a little bit. It's what the browser uses to request information from a web server. Basically, as I said earlier, there are different verbs. You have get, post, put, delete, some of other things. I don't actually remember all of them. I think patch is one. A lot of people use those verbs in a thing called REST, which is a way for browsers to talk to servers in a kind of like a command-driven way, like, hey, save this data as this thing with this ID, or please delete that user, or let's update this user with this information, which is what a patch would be. In general, I mostly use WebSockets now because it lets me do all of that stuff in a not HTTP way, and it's bidirectional. So what WebSockets are is it's a different kind of connection than HTTP. Basically, what it is it's a bidirectional pipe. So the client connects to the server using WebSockets, and then from that point on, as long as the client's still connected, the server can actually send information to the client. In general, with HTTP, when you make a request, the server can send data once, but then the client just kind of stops listening, which is fine. And there's other ways you can do weird stuff with like polling and like leaving connection open and telling it to write, and then you read from it periodically, and it just feels kind of gross. WebSockets, on the other hand, are used everywhere for chat applications a lot of times. I'm pretty sure Facebook Messenger uses WebSockets. Any of those IO games that are multiplayer games use WebSockets. Because what it does is when the client connects, you can just keep pushing data to it. You can just send it JSON objects. You can send it whatever you want. And the client can deal with those as they come in. It basically lets you do event-driven stuff on both the client and the browser. So instead of the server just being event-driven by the client is also event-driven by the stuff the server sends. That's pretty cool because it lets you write like tiny chat applications and etc. Let me see if I can get my example to run because it was broken and then I didn't. Okay, so let's see if this will work. Let's look at our package JSON and see if we have anything in here. Looks like we have. Oh yeah, so another thing that the scripts let you do is you can have build steps using Webpack and stuff like that in the package JSON scripts. And basically, whenever I use a new project, this is the first thing I look at is the package JSON file. So in here we have a thing called dev that runs all of the dev steps. So let's do that real quick. So npm runs dev, sets up the server, it's running some stuff. And you can see it says Primus got created and Webpack's watching stuff, a whole bunch of different stuff. So let's see if this is actually running on this port. It should be. It is not. Okay. It should have been running. What? Okay, I don't know what port this is on, so we'll have to look at the Webpack config. Oh, it is port 8000. Okay. I think I'm running something else on that port, so it took over. All right. The beauty of running examples. All right, so let's refresh this. Okay, didn't like that either. All right, well, that's broken for some reason. But WebSockets, with the WebSocket example, that should have sent, that should have connected the server to the client, and the server would have kept sending a message to the client. You can also do using things like, let's see if I have this example real quick. Oh yeah, where it is, Websocket Demo, cool. So here we're using a thing called Primus. Primus is going to wrap into the HTTP server a little bit and create another kind of server on a different port for WebSockets. And so here we're this should look pretty similar to the HTTP thing. So on a connection, we take in this thing, they call it a Spark, but it's really a connection. I don't know why it's called Spark. I think it has to do with transformers or something. I don't know if I can say that. Oh no, we're gonna get sued now. So we can tell the Spark to write this data to the client. What is cool about this is we can actually do something like Primus on data. I think it's Spark data like this. And now, when the client sends us data, we can do something else here. and write back to the client, or we can actually say primus.broadcast that data. And what will happen when you broadcast data is it sends it to every connected client. So you can see how easy it would be to write a chat application, because if a client sends you a chat message, you just broadcast that chat message to everyone else that's connected, and then on their client in the browser, you just add a div in the browser, and it'll just show the next line of text. So you can actually write a chat server in something like 50 lines of code, I think, or something like that, which is pretty neat. That's most of what I have going over all of this stuff. Does anyone have questions or anything that they would like me to clarify? I know that was a whole bunch of information that I just dumped on you, so feel free to ask for clarification or ask for me to go back and re-explain something. Cool. All right. I guess everybody's good. Hopefully you guys can go go check out Node now. Don't be scared of the documentation. I know it looks kind of crazy, but a lot of times if you will Google, a lot of people have answered these in far clearer ways. If you want to, yeah, if you want to ask me a question after this, I'm on Twitter. It's probably the best way to get a hold of me. I probably won't pay attention to Slack or anything like that. I have those apps. I don't run those apps most of the time because, yep. Right. Yeah, let's call it that. I'm just so, yeah, I get distracted by blinking lights. Yeah, so hopefully you guys can go write some cool tools and cool apps using Node, and yeah.
What's your Twitter handle? Should we just go to your profile?
I said that at the beginning of the talk, my Twitter handle. At Van Treese on Twitter. So come message at me.
Hey, can you show us your website?
We're gonna find out what's on it. Here we go. What is this? I'm really confused right now.
How many are your domains?
Huh. It looks like someone somehow hijacked my background image. Because all my data's still here. You can see these are previous talks. Okay, anyway. Yeah, that's beautiful. Look at my beautiful website. And there's some bananas. Cool. Well, thank you guys for coming, and I hope that was helpful. And please hit me up on Twitter if you have questions.